Dr. Ryan Rush is a pastor and author who is very passionate about family. He currently serves as the pastor of Kingsland Baptist Church in Katy, Texas, and has also served as Adjunct Professor at Liberty University. His new book, Restore the Table, Discovering the Powerful Connections of Meaningful Mealtimes, looks at how shared meals can be transformative to families and relationships. Please welcome Dr. Ryan Rush.
Dr. Ryan Rush, welcome. We're so glad to have you with us today. And I'm excited about your book, Restore the Table. But before we get to that, for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background. You're a pastor, you've done a lot of things in the church, you're teaching, I think, at Liberty. Tell us about kind of what brought you to sort of write this book and kind of what you've been doing.
Thank you, Bobby. I get to pastor a church in West Houston, Katy, Texas specifically. Amazing people. We live in one of the most international communities in America. And so we're more likely to live next door to somebody from a different culture than anywhere else in the nation. And that really creates a richness of excitement and experience, where we live. My passion, my heartbeat is family. And as I've looked over the last 3 decades at what can make an impact in families, just building healthy families, we keep coming back to a biblical idea that research now is really supporting. And that's the idea of having meaningful mealtimes at homes with the ones you love. That led on this journey, the book. And not only did I discover that mealtimes could make a huge impact in church families, but also this could be a tool to really build bridges outside of our regular circle with people who might normally not have a conversation. Yeah. And so it's been a blessing.
Yeah, I read somewhere that there is a correlation between the health of a child and how many meals they have with their family. I forget where that was. Are you familiar with that study?
Absolutely. In fact, there are several out right now. So there have been correlations made related to teen promiscuity, drug use, obesity, health, depression, and on it goes. Just coming down to this idea of having a meal. Now, my PhD hat says correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation, but the point is families who will take this step generally are spending a little more time together. And it's the most natural place to invest in our lives because we have to eat anyway, right?
Yeah.
It's something that we used to do a lot more naturally 30 years ago in our culture. And it's not unusual now for people to look up and realize they haven't had a single meal with somebody else over the last week. So it's just something we have to be intentional about.
It's funny. I can say this because I did a fast, but it wasn't a spiritual fast. I did a water-only 5-day fast a couple of years ago. And one of the surprising things about it was I thought the hard thing was going to be, being hungry, obviously. And I was hungry, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was not eating with people. I could have just sat there and watched them eat, but I realized that I felt bored so often. I've heard this too from other people who can't eat very often, or they have some kind of reason that it's amazing. There's something about, Jesus had an eating ministry, didn't he? You see, he's constantly eating with people.
Absolutely. All through the book of Luke, you look around and Jesus is constantly at the table with other people who are down and out, people who are religious, people who are following him. And it's making such a difference. And it's just so natural. Here's the difference, I think, that people sometimes get mixed up on. They think that in order to have meaningful meals, they have to be really fancy or special. Listen, you can have a meaningful meal with people you love over fast food. You can have it at breakfast or lunch. You can have some cold cuts and a sandwich. It doesn't have to be fancy. That's not the point. The point is you're breaking bread with somebody and you remove the distractions of technology and you really have a conversation.
Yeah, what practical tips do you have in terms of using food as a ministry for whether it's just your immediate family or maybe some people don't have a family or their kids are out of the house?
Right.
What are some things you'd recommend for believers that are watching now to even participate in the Great Commission or to invest in their kids? What's a great way to just do that meal?
That's such a great question. Bobby, when you look at maybe the most famous meal in history, Exodus 12, the Passover, one of the instructions that's given to families is that they're not to throw out any of the lamb. If they have more lamb than they can eat as a family, they're supposed to invite a neighbor. And the idea of of having too much of the Lord's love for just my house is a wonderful concept. To say, why not invite my neighbors over? So in our neighborhood, our next door neighbors are from India, their neighbors are from England, their neighbors are from China, and their neighbors are from Louisiana, which is kind of a foreign country. I'm not picking on Louisiana folks, but it's true. And so we have built a bridge over food. And it's amazing how different it is to say, hey, come over, I want to hear your story and share with you. There's a difference in then saying, why don't you come by and let's have a meal together? And we've had the privilege of sharing meals with all those people where we get a chance to hear their stories and they hear ours. And so it's such a natural invitation piece for Christians to use to build bridges.
It's interesting, even as I'm thinking through what you're talking about, how even the communion meal is a meal. It's in its original, I think they called it the love meal. Wasn't there's a passage in Leviticus that says something like, if you have your tithes and you can't get to the temple, like throw a big party and have a bunch of food and invite the Levites or something like that. Are you familiar with that text?
Yeah. Yes, and when you look at the Hebrew word for food is actually the same word for flesh. And the idea is, in the ancients, in a lot of parts of the world, they think of food as survival. We tend to take food for granted, but when you think of it in that way, you understand how intimately and deeply connected we are with food, which helps us understand why the Lord implemented the Passover meal and then later the Lord's Supper, and also why we innately, inherently appreciate coming together and build bridges around food. Like, it doesn't matter what somebody's background is, they generally have that understanding.
Man, I love this book. I really, really love the idea that you're putting out to Christians. I think people can make such a huge difference with food. People think they need to stand out in the corner with a megaphone and doing all this kind of thing. Maybe some people are called to do that, but just having a meal, most people are going to say yes. The book is called Restore the Table, Discovering the Powerful Connections of Meaningful Mealtime. Dr. Ryan Rush, thank you so much. I encourage people to get this book. It's a great read.
It's my honor to be with you, Bobby. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you, my friend.